Shri G.V. Prasad ji, respected trustees of the chamber, distinguished members and committee friends, and also the special invitees that we've invited today. I have great pleasure in extending a warm and hearty welcome to you all to this session on lessons uh, from our journey in building a resilient company with Shri G.V. Prasad. Shri G.V. Prasad is the co-chairman and managing director of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories. Merchant Chamber of Commerce and Industry has evolved as the leading chamber of Eastern India, providing the crucial link between businesses and policymakers, creating an economic environment which helps members prosper and flourish, benefiting all stakeholders in the economy. This afternoon, we have amongst us a few past presidents of the chamber, Shri Atmaramji Sonthalia, Shri Arun Kumarji Saraf, Shri Santosh Saraf, Shri Suresh Junjunwala, Shri MC Shah, Shri Hemant Bangar, Shri SS Bagadia, Shri Arun Kumar Chudiwal, Shri Vivek Gupta, and Shri Anupam Shah. We are honored to have Shri G.V. Prasad for kindly accepting our invitation and coming via webinar today, in spite of his busy schedule. Shri G.V. Prasad is the co-chairman and managing director of Dr. Reddy's Laboratories and is an iconic figure in the healthcare industry, who has successfully contributed in building an organization of great repute. Shri Prasad was previously the managing director of Cheminor Drugs Limited, which was merged with Dr. Reddy's Laboratories in 2001. He studied chemical engineering and earned his master's degree in industrial administration from Purdue in the year Purdue, USA. In 1985, Sri Prasad co-founded Benzex Labs, an API manufacturing company which was later acquired by Dr. Reddy's. Friends, the beginning of the end of COVID-19 is visible now, which has had an unprecedented pan-global effect. India is one of the foremost nations to come up with an effective vaccination program in collaboration with global bodies. The nation is preparing for a massive vaccination drive, the largest ever in history. The world is looking at India as a beacon of hope to manufacture and supply the huge number of vaccines needed to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic. We are really proud of this development. India is the largest provider of generic drugs globally. Indian pharmaceutical sector is expected to grow to US $25 billion by 2025. Pharmaceutical exports from India has stood at 16.3 billion in the year 2020. As the COVID-19 hit the world, the Indian pharmaceutical industry was able to manufacture and maintain supply chains over the lockdown period and exported medicines such as HCQ and paracetamol to more than 50 countries, keeping its image of a reliable pharmacy of the world intact. Indian pharmaceutical sector supplies over 50% of global demand for various vaccines and 40% of generic demand to the US and 25% of all medicines to the UK. Dr. Reddy's has been at the forefront of this pharma sector in India. We would like to hear from Shri G.V. Prasad on how he built a company which has the resilience to face challenges that the new world order has thrown upon us. With these observations, I would like to humbly invite Shri Prasad to share his perspective with all of us. Sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I am going to just share my journey with Dr. Reddy's and the Dr. Reddy's evolution from a company which was founded in 1985 to what it is today. And along the way, some of the lessons we learned in building a strong and resilient organization. Also, along the way, some lessons that we learned in building an enterprise. Today, we are a $2.5 billion company. We export our products to many, many countries. US is our largest market. The second biggest market is India, and then we have Russia and a few other European markets. But we sell our products to almost 40 different countries. And the pharmaceutical industry is rightly getting its moment in the limelight now. The countries worldwide have recognized the strategic importance of the pharmaceutical industry. And the industry has also responded by driving innovation very fast. in terms of bringing new therapeutics and vaccines to the market at record speeds. So I'm very proud to be part of this industry and also be proud to see how the industry has developed in India. Certainly, the pharmaceutical industry is one of the few industries from India which are globally competitive, which are able to compete with China, with any other country in the world, and do it successfully. So, with that background, let me start with our journey. This company was founded by a scientist, Dr. K. Anji Reddy. As a family business, I'm his son-in-law. I was part of the board when it was founded in 1985. Um, and I was also an entrepreneur in my own right, started a small API business, which got acquired by Dr. Reddy's. And I left the industry again to rejoin in a full-time role in 1990. From then on, I've been involved in most aspects of the company, and my journey has been very exciting. And the circumstances in which this company was built would be interesting for some of you as you deal with the growth, globalization, organizational evolution, and other challenges. So I would like to keep this as more as a conversation than as a monologue. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend 10-15 minutes outlining the journey, and then you can ask me questions and I will respond to the questions so that I really answer what's in your mind rather than make an assumption of what you want to hear. This company, like I said, was started by Dr. Anji Reddy and a couple of his associates. There were two companies initially. They started as API companies. APIs are active pharmaceutical ingredients, which is the active molecule which works in your body. In the 80s, this was a sunrise industry. We were dependent on imports from Europe. China was also not in the picture then. It was largely US and Europe. And India had a very high duty structure. So the local market was highly protected. And you just had to make products and you could make a lot of money. So the industry started in the 80s and it grew very, very rapidly. And of course, it attracted a lot of new players and the industry became very competitive and so on. But Dr. Reddy's was a pioneer in this. Our founder, Dr. K. Anji Reddy, was a scientist and technologist. He was working for IDPL, where he learned this business. IDPL was a joint venture of the government with the Russian government. And he established this with small capital and it grew quite rapidly. And then he started globalizing, expanding the portfolio, diversifying into related businesses, finished dosage, biologics, discovery, and all of that, moved up the value chain. So there are three things which were constant throughout our journey. One is the emphasis on technology, science and technology and innovation. That was always, something. Dr. Reddy himself, being a scientist, was part of the organizational culture and ethos, and science had primacy in the business. The second thing was the legacy of being a first mover always. So when whatever molecule we started, we were the first to introduce in India, first to export it, do many things for the first time in India. So this pioneering spirit was always there. The third thing is, I think there was a great emphasis on people, because ultimately it was the people who gave us this growth, scale, and innovation. So it was a very people-friendly company. All this and an emphasis on making medicines affordable. So once we started making finished dosage, we were bringing down prices quite rapidly for the Indian patient and the Indian healthcare system. And as we globalized it, we took this affordable medicines platform to the world. The rest of the industry are also doing the same things, similar things at different rates. And hence, the space available for the Indian pharmaceutical company expanded dramatically with the companies entering regulated markets like Europe and US, where the prices were very good, and the skills that we had in serving the Indian market at a low prices helped us compete effectively in the Western markets. So that's the industry grew very rapidly, and India became a dominant force in the world of APIs and generics, and came to be known as the pharmacy of the world. And today, I think the Indian pharmaceutical industry is highly respected. As I look at the journey, in the first few years, our emphasis was really on viability, making the business model work, meeting our financial commitments to all our stakeholders. And the promoters were involved in every decision and every interaction. They were aware of everything. They were full on managing the organization. After a while, the growth happened, and to handle the growth, we had to build a second level of leaders, and they in turn took up the execution, and that drove another period of growth. And again, even then, after some while, that growth also, people by themselves couldn't handle, and things were falling apart, and hence then the organization had to focus on processes. So we started with the entrepreneur being the locomotive force. From there, you had the entrepreneur and the dedicated team of people who ran the businesses. And from then on, the growth moved to a phase where you needed people, process, competence at various levels of the organization. And all of this came together to help the company grow. Along the way, the company came to be known for its science and technology innovation, people practices, and governance. I didn't talk about the full history, but we are a listed company. We are listed in India as well as in the US. We were one of the first few companies from India to be globally listed in the European exchange, and then after that, the US exchange. Of course, being listed in the US drove a higher level of compliance in everything we did because of the strict regulatory regimes of Sarbanes-Oxley, FCPA, and many other things. And this helped the company streamline its operations, improve its reporting standards, and all of this helped even drive the performance and make it more sustainable. In this journey, we learned many lessons. I'll talk about a few lessons and then open up to Q&A. This journey, when I look back, it looks like a very orderly journey, but it was not orderly. It was messy. Every now and then we had challenges, we had setbacks, and there's variability of performance. Sometimes we focused too much on the long term, the short term suffered. Sometimes as entrepreneurs, we took too much of risks, and it hurt the company. So, lack of process robustness to manage scale resulted in execution challenges. And within the group, we had businesses of different levels of maturity, some spinning out cash, some burning cash. And you tend to manage everybody, every business unit in an equal way, and that sometimes is suboptimal. As we went into systems, overdrive of creating systems to bring predictability to the organization. The systems do help. It helps in bring order to the growth, but they can also become self-limiting and inhibit entrepreneurial energy. Many times we don't think big enough. We are always constrained by thinking that resources are not there, but we discovered that the only limitation can be your imagination. And if you can imagine it, you can find the resources to make it happen. The leadership is a scarce resource. And if you had good management and good leaders, that is the scarcest resource. And that's how things get done when you have the right leaders paying right attention to the right resources. Also, we've embarked on a journey of improving things, and we've learned that there's enormous potential to discover value from your operations. And then you focus on continuous improvement, quality systems, all of that. But everything can be improved. So where do you start? Where do you prioritize? These are things which are again important. And then we've learned lessons in how to prioritize areas, how to focus on what really matters, what delivers results. And in the end, a company is nothing but a collection of great leaders who inspire themselves, inspire their teams, and have the confidence to bring extraordinary results. And every employee has a lot of potential, and it's the job of leadership is to bring that potential and make it work for themselves and for the organization. And that responsibility is there for management as well as for each individual. So I read somewhere that to build a lasting organization, you need to be building people, focus on a purpose which is bigger than just wealth creation, and also create an atmosphere where everybody finds his true potential. And in Dr. Reddy's, I've tried to do that. We are a valued employer. Many of our colleagues have become CEOs of competitors. They work for many organizations around the world. It's a matter of pride for us to see our alumni so successful. So we have invested disproportionately in science and technology, in people, and in creating a good, transparent governance system. And this is somewhat defines our existence. The company every time had a setback could come out very rapidly because of the spirit in the people. People took great responsibility. Even if you see this last 1 year, which has been quite challenging, though in the case of pharmaceuticals, primary demand was not affected, it was not easy running operations with high infections, with people scared of coming to work, many people working from home. But even during this period, we have grown financially. We have delivered growth over the previous year of double-digit growth. We've also launched products for COVID in record time. We were from start to finish within 60 days, we launched 2 therapies. We tied up with a Russian company to help them bring their vaccine to India, which is showing great results and will be launched in the next few weeks. And at the same time, we helped keep our employees safe and healthy. Of course, we had a lot of infections and we gave our full support to the people. And also we helped the community. We ran a meals program serving 25,000 meals a day for over 2 months for migrant workers who lost their jobs. And we supplied rations to over 10,000 families in AP. We also supplied medical kits to public servants and for healthcare workers. We made sanitizers in the early days because that became a shortage item. We distributed that free to the government employees. And, we have a groundswell of goodwill today in the community because of the work we do. And also because of our purpose of bringing affordable medicines. And we live our credo of good health can't wait in this way. So this is a very, rough description of our journey. But, I'm happy to open this floor to questions that you may have. Even if they're not related to the journey, if they're general topics, anything, please feel free to ask me. And if one of you can moderate and ask the questions, I'm happy to answer. Over to you.
Okay, so Shri Prasad, we are a small group of committee members. So would it be okay if they directly ask the questions, because it'll just be otherwise, a little bit of a Chinese whisper.
Sure, yeah? Not a problem. Not
sure.
A problem.
So who would like to go first for a question?
If no one has a question, then I would be, very grateful if Shri GV Prasad were to,
So
sir.
please call me Prasad. No need of Sri or a G or anything.
Sir, this is actually such an interesting time for the pharmaceutical industry,
Yeah.
especially companies are kind of handling this hyper growth of activity, attention, as well as growth. I wanted to kind of almost like an advice to also entrepreneurs that, for example, how does a pharmaceutical company move very swiftly with large decisions to scale? For example, if we talk specifically about Dr. Reddy's partnering with Sputnik, launching it, so kind of how does a project like that come about in terms of ideation, execution, ramping up, scaling? What's the mindset?
So, sometimes these things happen by luck. The story of this vaccine is very interesting. We don't have any background in vaccines. We have a biotech division. We make biotechnology drugs, but they are therapeutic drugs, MABs, monoclonal antibodies. We have zero experience in vaccine. But, we have a large business in Russia, and we have a good reputation in Russia because of our presence there for over 2.5 decades. So the Russians felt comfortable talking to us. And till today, we still don't have a very formal agreement. We just, we just said, you will be our partner. We said, yes. So we signed an MOU saying we'll distribute. We'll have rights to the first 125,000 doses they have. And then we'll help them register the product here, oversee local manufacturing, and distribute the product, establish the cold chain. These are things we know well. So it sometimes, you don't plan it. In fact, my CEO who runs the company, I've stepped off as CEO, is Mr. Israeli told my colleague Deepak, who actually runs another business unit, said, don't do this vaccine. We don't have the experience. Don't get into it. You'll get us all into trouble. This guy didn't listen to him. He said, I'm going to do this. And he went around and did it. And almost the day before he was signing, he told us, look, I've closed the deal. I want to sign. And so in spite of management telling him not to do, he went around and did it because he felt it was the right thing to do. And we actually applauded him for not listening to us, but doing the right thing for the patients and for this thing. We may not make a lot of money in the end, but we'll be part of the solution here. And that is what drove him. And this guy is a very social-minded guy, very a big advocate for patients. So he said, I have to do this. We have to do this as Dr. Reddy's. So I heard what you say, but I'm not listening to you. And he brought the agreement to us and said, it's ready for signing. I recommend that we sign it. So sometimes, you have great leaders who take the initiative and get things done. That's how it happened. I can take no credit for this.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Prasad.
We have, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please. Yes, Shri Bagadia ji.
Yeah. Mr. Prasad,
Yes.
your company must be contributing many $1 million for your R&D expenses.
Yes.
So can you please tell us that how much percentage is being spent on R&D?
So our R&D budget is usually about 12 to 13% of revenue. This includes R&D in multiple businesses. Our active ingredients is about 2 to 3%. 6% or so is in generics, our core business. The rest of it is in the future businesses like drug discovery, biologics, vaccines, things like that. So cumulatively, it's in double digit, low double digits, 11, 12% or so.
And my next question is that since you are exporting so much of the product to the US, so what are the regulatory hurdles there?
So the US has a very lengthy regulatory system. You have to develop a product, file the application, and the application has to be scrutinized, and the people have to come and inspect your facilities, approve your facilities, and only then you can export. This whole thing can take anywhere at a minimum of 3 to maximum of 10 years also, depending on the molecule, depending on the patent expiry. So once you get into the chain, you start filing every year, wait for patent expiries, and then launch.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes?
Medicine in itself, or this industry in itself, as a commoner, or when we look at from outside, we always perceive that it's a no gain or no profit business, if I may say so. But otherwise, we know that it is a hugely, if I may just use the word, profit churning industry. How do you actually walk the talk of balancing this delicate rope, where you have to be sure that it's not immensely profitable, because ultimately it gets transferred to the consumer, who are all of us,
Yeah.
and also have enough that you're able to do the R&D, and you're able to bring future medicines and the vision to the country. So how do you actually do this? I think it's very intriguing to an outsider.
Yeah. So you're right. The industry is very profitable for established players. It's also true that we can make profits and also supply affordable medicines. I'm not saying we will be the lowest cost producer of products, but we can bring affordability to healthcare by providing lower cost alternatives to expensive drugs, branded, expensive, innovator drugs. So that's our business model. So affordability is part of our business model, but it doesn't mean that we will be the lowest price. So for example, there's a 5 rupees tablet. There's no incentive to make 5 rupees 4 rupees. It's not going to benefit the patient. But if it's a 5,000 rupee product, bringing it to 2,000 has a lot of value to the patients. Similarly, there are drugs which are costing 50,000 rupees as a dose. By launching in India through indigenous technology, we are able to bring it down to a fraction of the cost. So when we talk about affordability, we are making high cost medicines affordable and accessible. We are not committed to saying we'll give you the lowest priced product in the world. That is not affordable is not cheap. So I don't find a dichotomy in this, that you can make money and you can make affordable products affordable. The real challenge in India is not the cost of medicines, but the last mile connectivity to the patient and the doctor. We have our primary healthcare network is not so good. In West Bengal, for example, I think the access to primary healthcare is not that great. Kerala is very good. Southern states are slightly better. North is not so good. So we have a very variable healthcare system, which I think the government recognizes. And now with this National Digital Health Mission, they are creating a system by which access to healthcare can, become be a combination of digital and physical, and make it much more easy for people to get consultations done with the doctor. So our problem in healthcare is not medicines; it is really healthcare providers and access to that. Thank you.
Great.
Can I take a question, Akash, Mr. President?
Yes, please. Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Mr. Prasad, I had a question for you that definitely Dr. Reddy's is a very, very large organization, close to 3 billion. And when a CEO of that organization tells the person that don't go ahead with this project, maybe it's a vaccine project or something, and the guy goes ahead and he does very well for himself, everybody applauds him. That's very good. What he would have, if he would have failed, if this would have turned out to be a disaster, I'm sure you must have created a culture in the company where the guy would still be perhaps there in the organization, taken care of. So how do you create this culture in an organization where the guy has the guts to do something which is not in line with the top management's goal and still come out and, okay, he was successful, that's a different story. What happened if he was not? This is my question. Just wanted to learn that.
No, good question. Very good question. And I, sometimes this is not a common thing that they don't listen to me at all and go off and do their own thing. This is not common behavior. So even in my team, it is uncommon. The thing about this is this, that we have created a culture where doing the right thing with the right intention, we will forgive. But if a guy violates basic ethics or principles, we will not tolerate, even if he's the most powerful guy, even if it's me. So in that situation, his intention was good, his effort was good, the risk was reasonably low. So he actually did the right thing. Of course, it's a diversion from his main responsibility, from his main business, and he's not meeting his targets there, whatever. But he did it for the right reasons, and that we will applaud, and we won't, have a problem with that. In fact, we applauded him, and we publicly said this, that this guy doesn't listen to us, and he didn't. And he's the vaccine man of Dr. Reddy's, we call him now.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay. Who's the next person asking the question?
If no one has a question, I can always. I have a couple of questions. Always.
Mr. Shah has a question.
Sure.
Akash, hi.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Namaskar, sir. We had the pleasure of listening to you at ISB 10 years back.
Hi, Prashant.
So I'm from healthcare space. Just a comparison between two organizations.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Can you repeat the question, please?
Also starting in the same time frame, 84.
Can you repeat your question? I lost it. The audio wasn't that great.
Dr. Reddy's with Apollo Hospitals, one of the pharma giant, largest player, second. Go ahead, audible.
Not audible. I heard Apollo.
Dr. Reddy's with a market capital of 8,000. Apollo has a market cap of 30,000. Yes. So just very curious to see the comparison between the two companies with the same sales figures but different margins, same timeline, 35 action seat. So how do you compare? What's your take on these two companies?
So, firstly, I can't talk about them as a business, but we are in different operating spaces. They are a hospital, and we are a hospital chain, and we are a pharmaceutical company. They are Indian-based and Indian operations. We have global operations. I think even in revenue, we are bigger than them. So I don't know. We are not comparable, other than that both founders are Reddy's, and they're both from the same city. I can't see how we can compare them.
Can I ask something, Akash?
Yeah, sure.
Sir, Suresh Junjanwala here. Sir, my question is, COVID brought a lot of misery, to to all over the world, but it has also thrown an opportunity in offline consultations, in reaching, as you said, the last mile connectivity with the patient. Don't you think we should seize this opportunity and enhance this so that that last mile connectivity, especially in countries like us and others, is achieved, and the healthcare goes to the farthest corner, and that will help not just the population, ordinary population, but also companies like you, which can also partner the government in doing this. This is one. Second question is, so is there something like a treatment regimen? We have been talking about vaccines, that is a preventive one. But what about people who are getting this disease? Is there some kind of a treatment regimen on the cards? Some cocktail of medicine, some cocktail of something? That I think it's quite some time has gone by. By this time, there should have been some alternatives of 1, 2, 3. These are the cocktail, these are the medicines by various circumstances. This should work. So you are a better person to answer this. So yeah. I would like to. I couldn't contain myself in asking this question to a person like you, who's an icon in the field, in this field, sir. Thank you.
So firstly, I think on digital, I completely agree with you. And I'm happy to tell you that the government is doing a massive project on this. The government actually is creating this public commons like the UPI for digital payments, Unified Payments Interface. They are doing something very similar with something called a health ID, which will be linked to your Aadhaar card and which will enable you to access your medical records from anywhere to anywhere. It will also support the creation of an ecosystem of doctors, hospitals, diagnostic centers, and patients in a digital way. And it will promote a lot of innovations in digital, as well as the data will become available for insights, analysis, and data analytics, artificial intelligence, and all of that. So the government has this vision, and this is happening now as we speak. And certainly, I think the government is motivated to do this. I heard the PMO reviews this every 15 days, this project. So I think what you said is going to happen. The second one on the industry finding a cure for this virus and the treatment for the virus. You may feel that the industry is not doing enough, or the world has not done enough to find a cure, or has been unable to find a foolproof cure yet. But it's not for lack of effort. I have not in my lifetime seen the amount of work that has happened on this disease, both from innovation, in terms of clinical development, in terms of hospitals, all of that. But to develop a foolproof medicine requires time, because the biology of the body is not as well understood as a mechanical device is. So it behaves in very different ways, and each of us is different and unique. So the virus is clearly known now. The sequence is known. How it operates is known. But what impact it has on each person is very different. In some cases, it is just mild, nothing happens. In some cases, it affects lungs. In some cases, it affects the heart. In some cases, it affects the kidneys and all that. So a lot of work is going on as we speak to find a way to counter the virus. It's a matter of time that you will have a foolproof antibody or something which you can take and it will just block the virus. But the logistics of doing a controlled clinical trial, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, takes a few years for any drug. In spite of the various accelerations that we have done, we've still not been able to find a completely foolproof thing. Having said that, the treatment has evolved quite a bit since February, March, when we had the peak till now, and you can see patients, the death rate is falling everywhere in the world. And even products like Remdesivir are showing good results if they are given early on in the infection process. The problem that we have not been able to solve is when the infection overwhelms the system, and you have autoimmune bodies and your own immune system starts attacking your internal organs. But some diseases cannot be cured. If you see the common cold, we don't have a remedy. We can only manage the symptoms. And it's a virus. It's also a coronavirus. And the best thing you can do is an influenza shot every year you take. So, it's not like we have the means to tackle every disease, especially diseases like viral infections. Because there's nothing, it's not like an antibiotic you take to kill a virus. A virus has no life, it's a particle. It is your internal machinery which is propagating the infection. So it's a bit complex. The immune system is a very complicated system. It's a beautiful system. But we should not expect a completely foolproof cure to be readily available in the next few months. You will have systems which will reduce the severity of the disease. And the vaccine is the best way to really prevent infection.
So what I was talking about is not a foolproof cure, but with so many subjects to experiment on, I'm sure doctors are trying their best to see that the patients get relief.
Yeah,
Now,
they
in
are doing
various disciplines, some kind of treatment protocol could be developed, acceptable treatment protocol, which can reduce the misery of the patient, which can go towards containment of it. That kind of, I think, the whole focus is on vaccine. But what about the treatment protocol in every respect? Say in lung scare, there could be something. For other various infections, different protocols should be developed. I think the pharma companies can join with the medical bodies in the various systems, like a Diabetes Association of the World, like Heart or something, and then take a pioneering effect in having these, because everyone's experience is there, global experience is there. Why don't you merge them one and get into something? Just an idea, sir. You're the
No,
boss.
you're right,
Thank
but that is happening. I mean, I have to tell you that it is happening in a big way. And there are protocols now. It's not that we don't have treatment protocols. But the problem is we have to rely only on existing drugs, which are repurposed for this product. Developing a drug need de novo takes multiple years. You have to test for safety, then efficacy, then all that. So you have to go through phase 1, phase 2, 3 trials, animal trials, all these things. It's a long process. So to avoid that, the entire effort has been to find existing drugs which can help reduce the severity of the disease. So all the protocols today are based on existing drugs. Some antibodies have been quickly accelerated, and Mr. Donald Trump took one and it worked for him. That kind of thing are available now. They're going to be available. So there is unprecedented collaboration between the medical fraternity and the pharmaceutical industry and the national health institutes. So I'm hoping that we'll soon have better protocols, but protocols do exist today. They do exist and they are proving to be effective in many cases.
When are we going to have the protocol given to Mr. Trump in India? I mean, that kind of protocol available to Indians, in India.
I cannot tell that. I think there is a lot of research happening and we have to wait for the outcomes. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question that we have? Because I think we've asked quite a few questions, sir. So, but if we have a couple of more questions and you're okay with it, we'll wrap it up after that. Yeah.
Sure.
So,
I had a question with permission, Akash, if I could ask.
okay, sure. Unless there's somebody else who's not yet asked a question.
If anyone
then we
would like to go.
Yeah.
So, Shri Prasad ji, my question was very quickly. Pharmaceutical industry, as we've discussed, everyone is looking at it as a sea of opportunities right now. What would be your advice to small and medium business owners such as us? Which aspects, if someone wanted to become a part of the industry, where are the opportunities? Maybe in manufacturing, in distribution. Where do you see opportunities for medium businesses in case they wanted to take advantage of the sunrise sector?
See, the main area of businesses are ingredients which go into the medicine. That's more like a chemical industry. So if you have a chemical industry background, that's a natural fit to get into. So if you are in an OTC sector or a FMCG sector, the finished dosages could be a sector where you could get into. If you have, some expertise in some part of the value chain, that's where you should start. But without expertise getting into this business, I would not advise, because it's a very technical field. And if you have some adjacency on which you can build, then I would advise you to get into any part of the value chain. There's opportunity across the value chain, like in every business, but you need to have some core competence to get into this, to give you a head up, because every sector is competitive, even though it looks rosy from the outside. So you should know how to compete in the area that you choose to. And if you have some core strengths, I would suggest you build on that and select an adjacency.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if there is another question, but then I would like the opportunity to ask the last question. So if there's any more questions from our committee members or the special invitees, I'll take that now. Then I'll be asking the final question. Okay. So, Prasad, as you'd like us to call you, although it's kind of counterintuitive to just call you Prasad, uh, a mammoth amount of effort has gone into finding a vaccine. And as we all know, it's in record time. Never in the history of mankind has a vaccine come out so quickly for a problem at hand. Uh, just curious, if the same amount of effort and same amount of brains are put into larger diseases causing that much of death, is it possible to find cure for things like cancer and AIDS? And if so, what can we as a society do to make that happen? Because I think this just came to me on a wild thought. If the industry could galvanize so quickly and do things usually taking years in weeks, is this a possibility?
It is certainly a possibility, but this requires many parties to come together at the table. And the most important part is the regulator. So in a normal situation, no way the regulator would have approved a vaccine. The regulators are now open to take some risks because the consequence of not taking a risk is much worse. Similarly, whenever we take an application to the government of India now, we get a call the next day saying, are you ready for your presentation? We are opening it up, present your data, that kind of thing. Normally, we have to chase them months to get audience and to schedule the expert committee who does this kind of thing. So there's been unprecedented collaboration between companies, between scientists, between governments. If we can make this the norm, I think we can certainly accelerate, but not to the level that we did here, because we have taken some risks also in this process of approving some drugs, then taking back the approval, approving a vaccine and sometimes saying without data, and it's become a political issue, all this. So not sure this level of risk the regulator should take, but certainly the regulator and the industry and the medical community can work together on serious diseases. Having said that, some diseases we have achieved a lot of breakthrough in innovation, like in cancer, in AIDS, everywhere. AIDS is, you don't see that much mortality of AIDS reported anymore. It's also a viral disease. It has the challenges of a virus, which, the whole problem of finding an antiviral which works very selectively is there for that also. But, the industry has made a lot of progress, and you don't hear about AIDS as an epidemic anymore. Cancer is still an unconquered disease, but, it's also a very difficult disease, and it has many forms, and it's very insidious how it fools our system. So I think this whole pandemic has helped us look at the art of the possible. And I'm sure there will be changes in the R&D paradigm, regulatory paradigm, and the way companies work together to accelerate therapies and health.
Great. So with this, I would now request, Mr. Rishabh Kothari, our Senior Vice President, to propose a vote of thanks to Prasad.
Sir, a very good afternoon. It was indeed an honor and a pleasure. And especially one line that struck me is that there is a higher purpose to business than just making profits. I have been following what your organization does, and it's wonderful to see how you all walk the talk, and it's a big inspiration. We actually heard your entire journey, the journey of Dr. Reddy's, and how things have evolved. And I think this journey is like an education and an inspiration for all of us here today who are listening to you, sir. So we are extremely grateful to you. We know these are very, very busy times, especially for someone like you, and especially from the industry. that you come from, but you have spared the time to address our committee, and we are really grateful to you, sir. So I request all the members, our past presidents, to all heartily accept this vote of thanks with acclamation. Thank you very much, sir.
So much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. It was excellent. He just left.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.